Welcome, good morning to another show of the ZMC Business Hour, a business show dedicated to bringing communities together. This is our first show of the year 2021. We hope you had a fantastic break and wish you the very best for the new year. So, over the past 12 months, we've brought you many phenomenal guests from within the business community who've come along on the show and they've shared their expertise and their knowledge. And hopefully we've learned something from it. My production team today insisted that we do a show based on insurance and that I, for once, be in the hot seat and answer some questions. So in light of this, we've called on a guest host who shall be hosting today in my place. He's from a risk management background. He's been on as a guest before, and he does risk management. He does health and safety, and I do insurance. So hopefully, both topics complement each other, and hopefully we can shed some light on insurance, COVID, Brexit, and health and safety. So I'd like to introduce our guest host this morning, Mr. Majid Baris, who's been on as a guest before. Good morning, Majid.
Good morning, Abid. Good morning to the viewers.
I can't see you just yet.
Okay, well, I can see myself there, so...
There you are. You're there. Well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for taking this opportunity at such short notice.
You're welcome. Any opportunity to grill you, Abid, I'm in for it.
Let me just so I'd like to let the viewers know we are beaming live on Facebook. Please do share our feed wherever you're watching us from. I'm just going to share the feed on my Facebook. Bear with me 1 second. There we are. Sorry? 1 second.
Sorry, I think there was just some feedback from the Facebook thing once you were sharing.
Okay, so it's all yours, sir.
Right, okay, so Abid, now you've been in this industry for a while now, right?
Yes, 22 years.
Sorry, how long did you say? Did you have hair then? I'm presuming you had hair then.
Yes, I had hair then.
Okay, fantastic. So how many years did you say you've been in the insurance industry for now?
22 years.
22 years. Wow, okay. So how did you manage to get into the insurance industry in the first place? I mean, let's just have a little discussion about why you felt that the insurance industry was something that you thought you'd venture into.
I fell into it by accident, actually. After I left university, I was part of a transport company providing taxis and transportation in the West Midlands, and a lot of the employees, a lot of the drivers used to come to me to help to arrange their insurances, and I'd built up a relationship with all the local brokers. I'd built up a network with all the local insurance professionals, and it came to a point where I thought, okay, I've had enough of the insurance of the transport industry, and maybe I should look at something a bit more substantial, to my parents' delight, because they weren't too keen on me continuing in the transportation industry. And at that time, it was the General Insurance Standards Council exam. I sat that, set up, and here we are today.
Okay, so throughout these, did you say 22 years, yeah?
Yes.
Throughout these 22 years, what do you feel has been the most significant of changes within the industry?
Insurance industry is currently sitting at a $220 million industry. The UK insurance industry is the fourth largest insurance industry in the world and the largest in Europe. We are now out of Brexit, but we can still say the E word. Insurance changes by the day, depending on claims ratios, depending on what's happening in the world, what's happening in the markets, what's happening in the shares. and prices fluctuate, and prices go up and down, and premiums change. Insurers come in, insurers lose capacity, insurers go out, insurers get burnt due to claims ratios. And yeah, it's been a learning curve. I mean, bear in mind, I came into the sector with no business knowledge or business experience. I mean, I qualified as a teacher, so it's been a learning curve, and some of the changes, a lot of the changes I never thought about or foreseen, and they happened. So we've had to adopt and pivot many a time to keep up to date with the changes. So a typical thing would be that a certain insurer would be in the market for a certain product, a certain placement. They would lose their capacity, and then you'd have to search the market for an alternative insurer for a specific industry. And this is, I find, common. For example, if I give you the example of shisha caps, shisha caps is not something that any and every insurer bites your hand off for. So you have to search the market, and you have to really find an insurer who will specialize in such a risk, and that can be challenging at times.
Do you find that is risk specific? So depending on what level of risk certain businesses or anything poses, it would depend on what kind of insurers would likely to be taking on that insurance. I mean, you mentioned shisha cafes being one. You've got manufacturing as another, in terms of, there's high risk manufacturing and there's lower level risk manufacturing, as we understand in our industries. So would you say it depends on industry per industry, or risk, or is it dependent more on the risk?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're in health and safety, and you'll appreciate it more than anybody. Nobody wants a high risk, and insurers have their criterias. They have their internal risk assessments. Nobody wants a industry or a risk which is high risk. So you have the A-rated insurers, the Axis and the Vivas of the world, who just want simple stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have the B-rated insurers who will take a gamble and take on the risks that anybody else won't take on. And shisha caps being a prime example, the vaping shops, industries such as that, which are high risk, which are prone to fire.
Vaping shops actually aren't that high risk, only because I
attended a fire last week, and if you're on my WhatsApp status, you will know I attended a fire last week, which was in a vape shop.
Oh dear! Must have been some bad batteries.
Yes.
So, Abid, with regards to the insurance changes, I want to ask you a two-part question. First of all, do you feel that, how has insurance particularly been affected during the coronavirus period? Because, people will probably be asking the question, is my business covered, like business interruption during coronavirus? So, is that kind of thing covered? And I guess the second part is, towards the latter stages of the last year, we had the Brexit being finalized. How has Brexit affected insurance?
Coronavirus. So the minute
COVID
Boris Johnson instructed the first lockdown, my phone started going crazy. Business interruption, most commercial combined policies, and most business policies have an element of business interruption, and they have notifiable disease cover. However, COVID was not a notifiable disease until March last year. Therefore, a lot of insurers took the option that it's not covered. Now, there was a case in the courts about this, and the case is still going on. We haven't come to a full-blown conclusion yet, but the indications are that the insurance sector may be making some sort of payments. Now, you've got to appreciate every business is different. Premiums are based on turnovers. And the question then lies is, what do they pay and who do they pay to? I still get people ringing me once a week to find out an update. And what I will say to people is that if the insurance industry does decide that somebody is due a payment, they have a duty to contact you direct and offer you a settlement. COVID, and the thing with COVID is that it's still going on. So it's not a full-blown conclusion yet. We are in a third lockdown. We may even go into a further lockdown. So until this
Oh,
whole
right.
episode,
Okay.
whole nightmare is not over, insurances cannot even possibly determine who's going to get what. And you can have a interim payment, but even then,
Mm.
to what figure is that? And as I said, your business interruption is based upon your turnover, what your annual returns are. So it's very complex. People seem to think it's easy that the insurance industry should pay a set figure. It's not as easy as that, and there's a lot of calculations that need to be done, and a lot of boxes that need to be ticked. So
Yeah,
it's
apparently
still ongoing.
this is also something the government's like kind of having to overcome as a challenge to figure out how they're going to pay, directors of limited companies, because these are the people who have been left out from any kind of grants
Yeah,
up until
yeah.
for any kind of financial support by the state. So that's also something they're finding a bit of a challenge to
There was
kind of
also
overcome.
there has also been a mention that they may mitigate, and if you've received any government funding or government support, they may deduct that from your settlement. So
Mm.
that is also, and I've had conversations with clients who've been absolutely horrified with that. But the thing is, you do have a duty to mitigate your losses, and
Mm.
it is still being debated and still being discussed. So it's still an open book.
There's
We don't know exactly what's going to happen with that yet, but
Do you
as soon
think?
as
Do
we
you think in
know,
the
you'll
future
know.
this is something that can be added in by the insurers?
Sorry.
Do you think for the future this is something that can be added in by the insurers?
I
Are they going to
don't
consider?
think COVID will be, because again, COVID. Who wants a
Well, maybe not COVID itself, but what
who
about
wants a
any kind
great?
of situation with like the likes of pandemics like this?
The thing is, nobody wants great exposure, and now COVID is guaranteed great exposure, because we just don't know what's going to happen. We've got the vaccine now. We still don't know whether this vaccine is going to be an annual vaccine. We don't know what the long term or what the long lasting consequences of this are. We can speculate, and we can
Mm.
we can draw our own conclusions, but we don't know how long this will last. Will it be a year, 2 years, 3 years? Will it be an ongoing thing? Will the vaccine work? Now, all these things are relevant to the running of your business.
Mm.
So if they were to introduce COVID cover as such, it'd be it'd be like an open checkbook. So a lot of
Fair.
things have to be looked at.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you make of how Brexit is going to affect, or what's the word in the grapevine about how Brexit will affect insurance? I mean, I'm hearing things that insurance is likely to increase for a number of reasons. I don't quite understand it. Do you mind kind of
Well,
giving some?
we're pretty safe now, because Boris managed to pull off the deal in the 12th
Mm.
hour. Had we left without a deal, then there would have been a problem. We are in a hard market, and I'll talk about the hard market shortly. We are in a hard market, and a lot of this is to do with Brexit and COVID. But thankfully,
What is meant by hard market
hard
for
market is
those?
the last hard market was in 2009, when overnight you woke up and your car policy, the premium for your car policy was doubled. Currently, we are in a hard market for insurance as a general, and
Mm.
prices are about to hike. Prices are about to go through the roof. It's simply because the supply of insurance is less, and the
Mm.
demand for insurance is great.
Okay.
So the actual insurers are cutting down on their capacity, and the
Mm.
supply of insurance is less. And the demand to, I mean, in the world we're in now, there's so many different trades and so many different industries. I always say to people, insurance isn't as simple as ticking boxes. As brokers, as commercial brokers, as corporate brokers, it's one of the reasons I've lost my hair. Every business now is different. Every business has its own set of demands and needs. Every business has its own risk, as you'll know. You could have two
Yeah.
businesses in the same sector, but both having a completely different exposure. So as brokers, we need to make sure that their exposure is completely covered, and that everything in their business has the relevant insurance. So insurance is now very, very complicated. Sometimes I get calls from people, and they'll give you a business that they're doing, and you think, oh my God, how do I cover this? Where do I
Mm.
even start?
Mm.
So insurance has gone very, very complex now. Whereas back in the day, it was simple. You had your commercial combined, you had your property owners, you had your fleet. Now it's much more complex. So when the supply is great and when the supply is less and the demand is great,
increases,
you go into a hard market. So prices will increase. And I've had clients since March who've renewed, and they've been horrified that the prices have actually gone up. Well, if you look at what's happening in the world economy, this is the way it's going to be, unfortunately. You know, we've had COVID, and some insurers have actually paid out for COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Some insurers and some industries, because it's all based on your policy wordings. So if your policy wordings were to be open, insurers have had to pay out some businesses. So obviously it's going to have a knock-on effect. It's going to have a detrimental effect on the whole, on the sector as a whole. So we are in a hard market, and it's only going to get a bit more turbulent before the waters come down.
You know, one of the most common things that I come across in my industry from a health and safety perspective, you get some people who want to take the initiative and take extra risks by not taking initiatives in case there's an accident. They're not so bothered until an accident actually occurs. And one of the things that I feel they rely on is their insurance. So let me clarify something for business owners who may feel that insurance is going to help them in case of an accident. Can you insure yourself against fines, penalties, and imprisonment? Depending on
the situation. If you're a company director, you can get a policy which is directors and officers, which protects you and helps you in such instances. If you're an individual, then the answer is no.
In terms of the company directors, what does the insurance actually help with? To help them fight the case?
It helps for legal fees. It doesn't keep you out of prison. It doesn't mean that you can go and commit any offense and get away with it. It helps you and protects you. Like, I recently had a case where a client of ours, they are wholesalers, and they were importing goods in from the Middle East. And with all this Brexit stuff going on, a lot of the items were stuck at the docks for 2, 3, 4 weeks. HMRC decided that they'd possibly undervalued their stock in an attempt to pay low taxes. And because the client had the relevant insurances in place, he had the funds, he had the cover to be able to defend that. Now, that could have been a very costly gain hadn't he had the cover, because if HMRC make an action, then you have to see it through. You have to present your case. The legal fees for that are not cheap. But thankfully, he had the right covers in place. He hadn't underdeclared, and the matter was put to bed. So the relevant protection is very, very important. Sometimes, particularly with company owners, business owners, directors, a policy of directors and officers is very, very important. We overlook it. We don't care about it. We think it will never happen to us. But if you think that you're going to get a policy and then go and commit a criminal offense and it's going to keep you out of prison, unfortunately, it's not.
Well, this is the point that I was making, because, I mean, from a legal perspective, you can't insure yourself against going to prison. If you're found guilty and the judge sentences you into prison, and you can't insure yourself against going into prison or even paying fines. You can't say, no, I'm insured, my insurance will pay my fine, or they'll send somebody to prison for me. Do you know what I mean? So this is the kind of thing you get to hear, or you get people thinking that once they've got insurance, they're somehow invincible.
Well, you know what? I've had some funny requests in my time, but I've never had anything like that, thankfully.
Yeah, well, you know what? You'd be surprised the kind of stuff that we come across. Okay, let me ask you another question. There seems to be this feeling that insurers are always looking for ways to not pay out, right? So in the T's and C's, they've got requirements in there, which are in not just small print, but the small print of the small print, which people fail to read. So that if a claim is to be made, then the insurers are saying, we got you out, we caught you out, look at that small print and look at the small print of the small print. You'll notice that because of this and this reason, if you haven't got that in place, we're not paying you out. What's the reality? Is there a reluctance from the insurers to actually pay out, or and I know you're in the insurance industry, so be open and honest. And for the viewers,
Well,
tell them what the reality is.
I spent 8 years as a loss adjuster. And 6 out of them 8 years I spent as a fraud officer working for the insurance industry, tackling insurance fraud. Now, there is a myth. However, you have a duty to disclose all material facts. So when you get insured, the questions that you answer to get that insurance cover are known as indemnity questions. And in them questions, they will ask you certain things about previous claims, about any bankruptcies, about any criminal convictions. If it's a property policy, they will ask you about the construction of the property, about flat roofs. And amazingly, as an insurance broker and as an investigator, I have found 9 out of 10, the clients don't supply the correct information. Now, if your information is airtight, then you've left the insurer no choice but to make that settlement. However, if you haven't declared something, and I find, there's always a pattern. There's certain questions which are answered incorrectly in an attempt to bring the premium down.
What kind of questions are those?
Have you had a criminal conviction? Like if it's a car policy, have you had points? Have you had claims in the last 5 years? If it's a property policy, is there a flat roof? Are you in a flooding area? And what happens is the information is all readily available to the insurers anyway, but you have a duty of care to disclose all material facts. Now, if you're not entirely honest and truthful, you've given them ammunition to reject your claim. Now, in the days where I was a fraud investigator, I was dealing with a lot of car crime and a lot of car claims. And you can tell a contrived accident. You go and interview one witness and you know that this accident is contrived, yet we still try and get the claim through. But when we actually look at the policy itself and look at the indemnity part of the policy, we find that the policyholders had previous accidents which they failed to disclose on their on the insurance application.
Right. Okay.
So as long as we are upfront and honest about everything, you leave the insurer with no choice but to make that settlement. Now, currently we have in excess of about 300-400 claims within the business of our clients making claims. Now, as long as everything is as long as the information that is supplied is correct, the insurers have no choice but to pay. And if they don't pay in them circumstances, then there's channels and there's ways that you could pursue them. But what I find is all very well, it's easy to blame the insurer. But when you look a bit deeper, it's not always the insurer's fault. And I've dealt with many clients who've rung me up, I've had this problem, I've had that problem, and you kind of, your heart goes out to them, and you want to help them. But the minute you start going a bit deeper, you think, hang on, sunshine, you weren't entirely correct at the time of inception. It's no point blaming them now, because had you been upfront, and also, when you don't disclose the information, there's no point taking that policy out. It's just like giving yourself a false sense of protection when you've got a policy which isn't worth the piece of paper it's written on.
True. So in terms of the common things that people do to try and get lower insurance, what are the things which they need to be very mindful of to make sure that they've disclosed, which they may not otherwise?
The thing is, if you've decided to take out insurance, if you have an asset that you want to protect, if you have a business that you want to protect, just be honest. And if there's any questions that you don't know the answers for, go and get them. If you're asking you for your turnover, or if you're asking you for your payroll, or if you're asking you certain things, go to your accountant, get the figures correct. Because if your figures don't match up, like, I'll give you an example. I had a client who had a mobile accessories phone shop, and his contents he declared at a certain value. My opinion was that he had more contents in there, but he said, no, this is the value I want, and I'm happy with that. Unfortunately, there was a claim.
Right.
There was a claim, and when the loss adjuster came in, the loss adjuster said, well, you're saying that your contents value is a certain value. However, by my calculations, your contents were worth a lot more. So they offered him a settlement of the figure that he had disclosed, and the amount that he was underinsured for, they took away that percentage.
Right. Okay.
So overinsuring and underinsuring is also a problem. If you know that you have certain contents in your shop, in your in your business, you've got 40, 50 grand of stock or contents in your business, declare it, because otherwise there's no point getting insured. If you're going to get insured wrong, there's just no point of getting insured. And we do see this a lot where, I mean, we see this a lot with landlords who want their property insured for millions, whereas the rebuild value is only about 200K. Now, again, that's a massive overinsurance, and in the event of a claim, you will get penalized for that. And when it comes to business policies, we want to show less contents or less stock in an attempt to get a cheaper premium. You will get penalized for that.
How, in terms of being penalized, how does that look?
So, for example, if you declared your stock at 25K, okay, in your stock, and the loss adjuster establishes that your stock was actually worth 50K, means you are 50%.
Same example of the phone shop that you,
It means you are 50% underinsured. So what they will do in that instance is pay you the 25 grand, take away 50% from that, which means you're left with 12.5 grand.
Okay, so that's obviously the penalizing of somebody who's underinsured. So in terms of somebody overinsured,
as well, if you're overinsured as well, it means that you've tried to. 1 second, we have this technical issue every Sunday. 1 second. So I'm in serviced offices where the lights on a timer for 20 minutes. If there's no movement in the office, the light switch off.
You need to start moving and do some, shadow boxing or something.
So when it comes to overinsurance, the same rule applies. They will penalize you the percentage that you were overinsured for.
Let me ask you another question, because nowadays insurance is so easy to buy online. People can, I always get my important insurances done from like yourself. But when it's so easy to buy insurance online and you can tweak your requirements and figures and stuff to get the insurance down, which I've seen people do all the time, it's commonly done with car insurance, isn't it? Right? So if I put £300 excess, but if I just leave it to £250 compulsory excess, how much difference is that going to make to the overall premium? If I put it, if it's parked on the pavement outside the house, if it's in a garage, how much is that going to make? If I change my job title, those kind of things people tweak and everything like that, and they try and get the insurances low. Share with us a little bit about your experience with people going through the online route and the difference it makes with being a broker. When does it pay? When is it good to do it online? And in your honest opinion, when should you really be going through a broker if you're for certain any type of insurance?
When it comes to personal lines, which is your own car and your own house that you live in, when it comes to your personal lines, it's always cheaper online, simply because there's so much more variety. Banks are doing insurance, supermarkets are doing insurance, Quick Fit are doing insurance. It's always cheaper to do it online. However, I will say that these tweaks that you talk about, every single tweak is noted and recorded. Every single tweak is noted and recorded. In the event of a claim, these things will be brought forward and will be considered.
Oh wow!
And if the insurer, and if the insurer feels that there's any malice here, they will refuse your claim. So in my fraud investigation years, I remember one case in particular where two vehicles had a collision, and when interviewed, both drivers claimed that they didn't know each other, and the passengers of all vehicles claimed that they didn't know each other. It transpired that the IP address for both insurances, for both cars, was the same.
Wow.
So the
Wow.
IP address, meaning the machine that had been used, the computer that had been used, was the same
To get
computer to incept both, albeit on different dates, but the IP address was the same. So when you think that you're making tweaks and you're withholding information, which is my point that I made initially, we try and cut corners. When you feel that you're making tweaks and you're trying to withhold information and you're trying to be clever and you're trying to beat the insurer, you will never beat the insurer, because the data available to us is incredible. Like you're saying that you park your car on a driveway where Google Earth shows that you have no driveway.
You can just see everything, yeah.
Yeah, you're saying that there's only one car in your family, whereas your electoral roll is showing that there's 8 people living in your house.
Yeah.
And 6 of them are over 18. So all these things are taken into account and taken into consideration. So, I mean, I'm what astonishes me, I still get calls today, similar to what I was getting 20 years ago, where clients are trying to advise me on what to do, on how to bring their policy down. And it's really infuriating, where, you know, I wouldn't teach you how to do your job. Okay, I would trust your judgment.
Do you still get
asked
to provide backdated covers?
Yes, I get. I had a call last week, backdated. We still get calls for the motor trade sector. I mean, we'll talk about the motor trade sector next. It's a massive topic, but we still, unfortunately, in this day and age, you know, we're in 2021. AMPR is common. That's for the motor industry, but even for your businesses or your properties, right? I always get called for after the event insurance, and I need to stress this fact that there is no such thing as after the event insurance for any claims. You need to get it beforehand, and also, I mean, if you were to get it done beforehand, it will cost you a fraction of the price that you are offering to pay to get it done after the event.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, nowadays you can't get away with it. You can't get away with it.
Yeah, and I mean the legal implications of that are dire as well. So, you know, my advice would be, if you've been, you know, if you haven't got it, I mean, sometimes it's genuine. Sometimes the insurer will cancel your policy, right? But you can't say that you were notified, because you've all got emails, you've all got phones in your hand, right? Yeah, insurers may not write out to you anymore unless it's extreme circumstances. But we have email. The insurer will contact you by text message. Insurer will contact you by WhatsApp. Insurers will contact you by, if you've authorized them, by means of Facebook. They will text you. They will phone you. They'll send you email. I mean, they've got 6 mediums, right, by which they can contact you. They will contact you, and they have, you know, funnels in place, and it's all automated. So there's no chance of you not actually receiving the notification. Now, if you choose to ignore that notification and then get pulled up for driving with no insurance, then there's no excuse for that.
Exactly.
And what I find is, when I get such calls, they will keep that specific information from me as well. So they won't tell me that they were contacted. They'll just say, "Oh, it got cancelled," and no one said anything to me. The truth is that doesn't happen. And in fact, if the insurer does cancel you without notifying you, they will get penalized.
Okay. What about, you know, in terms of motor insurance, what about people who use fleet insurance as a way of paying less for a group of people to be insured on multiple cars? How are they getting away with that?
There's fleet insurance, and then there's motor trade insurance.
Okay, so
for many years now, motor trade insurance has been used as a family policy. We've put our whole family on the policy. We've put our pets on the policy. You know, we've put our neighbors on the policy, and we've had the ability to drive any car. Now, I've been in the sector for many years now, and I've seen the transition and the changes. And I've also seen I'll use the word abuse. I've seen the abuse of such policies. I had a call last week. Actually, yes, a few days ago, I had a call from somebody who was trying to who had a trade policy for many years, but wasn't actually trading as a motor trader, and the insurer the insurers actually caught onto this, and they didn't renew, and the client, the individual phoned me up and says, "Is there any chance of a trade policy?" But I don't really trade. Now the answer to that is no. If you're not a motor trader, if you are not buying and selling motor vehicles, or you're not in that sector at all, then you shouldn't really have a motor trade policy. And if I give you an example of a case many years ago, I had a sole trader who was actually a builder by trade. So he was a builder by trade, and he had a motor trade policy. And he'd gone to one of his suppliers to pick up some materials, and on the way out of the suppliers, he was involved in a collision. When the loss adjuster spoke with him about the collision, the loss adjuster established that at the time of the collision, he was actually leaving his suppliers for the building trade. It had nothing to do with motor trade. So it was established that the client was, in fact, not a motor trader. He was actually a builder. So the policy was deemed nil and void. And as a result, his house was repossessed.
Wow.
Now, bearing in mind, I said he was a sole trader, so there was no limited company to protect him. He was a sole trader.
All the liability
any damages, yes. So any damages that were as a result of that went on to him personally. And I'll never forget the call he made to me potentially 10 months after that interview, where the bailiffs were on the front door repossessing his house, and he was on the phone screaming to me saying, "What shall I do?" So that's how severe and that's how serious it can be.
Wow.
So we take insurance very lightly. I feel we take insurance very lightly, and we think it will never happen to us. You don't want to be in that situation.
It's actually a legal transaction. It's a legal relationship as well, which is why we have to be very mindful of the technical information that we're providing knowingly. And even, if we're thinking of being a bit naughty, it's not even worth it, is it? You just rather be straight, be honest.
So that's the motor trade policy. So a motor trade policy, basically, if you're a motor trader, you can buy vehicles from the auctions or from anywhere, and you can drive any vehicle. Okay, you have a duty to inform the MID and put them on the database, and you're effectively insured to drive any vehicle. Then you have fleet policies.
Can I get my family on that policy as well, by the way, even though I'm the motor trader? And can I get
you can have your spouse on there.
Okay.
But anybody else on that policy must be part of that business.
Okay.
Even if they're in the capacity of an admin, but they must be part of that business. And what insurers have started doing now is asking for payroll and asking for evidence that these individuals are actually in the business. And also, if you're a motor trader and you've got 6 drivers on your policy, and yet you're only selling 1 car a month, insurers are asking for justification as to how you are paying the salaries of your staff. And also, if you're trading from your home address and you've only got 1 car parking space on your drive, insurers are keen to know where you're parking your stock vehicles, because if you're parking your stock vehicles on the roads, you're causing inconvenience to your neighbors, which may ultimately result in a claim, because somebody may damage your car, somebody may vandalize your stock. So insurers have really tightened it up now. Yeah, and also they will check your electoral roll to see how many people live in your house. Even if you've got a driveway where you can keep 3-4 cars, but you've got 7 people living in your house, they will bear that in mind. They've got Google Earth. They can see, they can zoom down live on your house and tell you exactly what your house what the situation is of your premises. So motor trade policies at the moment are very hard to do. No insurers want to take them on, and the ones that are taking them on are really, really stringent when it comes to the risk assessment of that policy. Then you have the fleet policies.
Yeah.
Now, fleet policy is basically a policy for your business, and all of your business vehicles are on that policy. And anybody over the age of 23 or 20, or anybody that works within the business can drive any vehicle. Now, these policies are vehicle based, so every vehicle you add on will attract a premium. Whereas the motor trade policy are drivers based, so every driver you add on will attract a premium. So if you are, in business, and if you have a business going on, and you have multiple vehicles for the business, I would strongly recommend that you take out the fleet policy rather than trying to go the backdoor route and taking out a trade policy, misusing the policy, and then in the event of a claim, getting burnt.
Thank you for that. I want to move on to the property industry for a second, because a lot of clients who I know, a lot of business associates or business professionals who I know, a lot of them do invest in property. And this may be property for renting out as HMOs, or just private landlords for the general houses, or even commercial property. Tell us a bit about the challenges within the property industry and
currently this whole property investment has really changed over the past few years, and the way people are buying property and letting property out has totally changed. So there's a new concept now, which is rent to rent. It's also known as HMO, also known as social housing. This currently is a massive problem within our sector. So this is when you have a property as a landlord, you give your property to a company on a 3-year or a 5-year deal, and they will in turn place homeless people in there, or they will place mentally challenged people in there, or they will place ex-offenders in there. Now, I've stressed this so much, but we still get horror stories. If your tenancy agreement isn't between the landlord and the tenant direct, then the insurer needs to be informed. And I've come across so many horror stories, right, where this hasn't been disclosed. Sometimes it's the broker's fault because they haven't asked the right questions. Sometimes it's the client's fault because they weren't explained it properly, and they didn't actually realize that they had to inform the insurer. But if you are using your property as a HMO, and if you have given your property to one of these RSLs or these middlemen or middle companies, as I call them, and they are placing homeless people in there, you must inform your insurer of that relationship. Simply because when you get insured as a landlord, they ask you the question about your tenants: are they DSS? Are they professional working? Are they students? Are they asylum seekers? Well, if you're giving your house as a HMO, none of these sections apply.
So in that situation, Abid, isn't there a requirement for that middle entity to obtain insurance themselves?
The middle entity is effectively a letting agent. So they will have their own liability insurance, but they can't insure your asset because the asset, the bricks and mortar, is yours. And this has been a lot of confusion in this. The middle entity effectively is a letting agent. I mean, what's the difference between them and a letting agent?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so they will have their own liabilities insured. They're doing a bit more than a letting agent because they're maintaining your property. They're sending in, the builders. They're sending the gardeners. They're sending in the maintenance people. However, the bricks and the mortar don't belong to them. And in the event of a claim, the landlord would be the person who's at loss. So the landlord needs to make sure that his asset is protected and covered appropriately, and that this is very, very important. And when I speak to RSLs, I tell them that always, and as an RSL, you have a duty as well to make sure you've informed your landlord, the person whose property you're taking on for 3 years, that they inform the insurers that this is what they're doing with the property. And honestly, there's been some horrific horror stories where people have lost, I mean, for some people, like property, it's an investment. It's a lifetime investment. You get some people who dabble in the property sector and they've got a portfolio of maybe 30, 40 properties. But for some people, they've got that one house that they rent out, and that's their pension and that's their investment.
Yeah.
And when that's not insured appropriately, and when the worst happens, it's honestly it's absolutely heart-wrenching.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be. I'm sure it would be for anybody. On a final note, Abid, we're approaching towards the end of the segment, and I can't believe we've already been online for about 45 minutes. We've talked about how insurers find their challenges with people they're insuring or the assets of their customers and so on and so forth, and those challenges. At times, do you feel there's something which business people, private individuals, whoever's obtaining insurance is or should be looking out for and asking their brokers, what are the right questions? Do you get rogue brokers in your industry, for example, who want, just for as a sales professional, they may want to swindle a few figures or facts just to get you on board? But we get it in our industry. Most compliance companies, organizations, when it comes to the selling of services, because it's a compliance service or a protection service, sometimes it's about the numbers, and then you get rogue salespeople sometimes going out, or rogue brokers who will missell something to get the client on board. And what are those? Do you get them, first of all? If so, what are the things to look out for?
The thing is that our compliance is so stringent that there's very, very less rogue brokers. However, saying that, I recently came across an Instagram post and a Facebook page where somebody was getting people insurance for next to nothing. Now, what I would say is, if you fall into that trap, then you have nobody else to blame but yourself. It's no use playing innocent afterwards, right? If you know something is too cheap to be true and you go ahead and you purchase that, then you have nobody else to blame. So this particular post was promoting cheap insurance. This post was promoting the taking off of points from your license.
Oh, wow.
And this post was also promoting helping you with your theory test and guaranteeing you a pass with your theory test. Now, we're not stupid, right? And if you claim to be that stupid, then you deserve what's coming to you. If it's too cheap, it's not. Yes. Now, and you know what astonished me was somebody had made a comment on there. I'm trying to get in touch with you, bro, but there's no response. Now I'm thinking, why would you get in touch with such a person? Why? Now, if you were to obtain insurance from this post and you were in court down the line, trying to argue your case, do you honestly believe that any judge in their right mind would take your side?
If there's a small change in price, if there's a slight adjustment, and you can say, okay, well, the original insurance was costing me like £250 for X, Y, or Z, and this one was costing me $220. It's not a massive difference, but it's a believable difference. Then I guess that's where it can be, questioned or queried. It would be a grey area.
What I'd say to people is
if you're buying for £100, then obviously you're going to raise some eyebrows, aren't you?
There's a FCA website where all brokers should be on. Check the FCA website.
This is good to know.
And when you buy your policy, rather than being price driven, try and be cover driven. Sometimes a better cover is only £10 more, because as brokers, we shop the markets and we have a whole array of prices come in front of us for your risk. I find that people are sometimes too price driven, and sometimes that policy is just not worth having. But they just want to give themselves satisfaction that I'm insured. Sometimes £10, £15, £20 more will give them much better cover, much better cover. So if you are going to protect your asset, and the asset could be your business, could be your property, could be your car, you take out insurance for a reason, and that's to protect your asset. So if you are going to protect your asset, then why not do it properly?
Yeah, on that note, which insurances are legally required, which you have to have for people, and which ones are like optional?
Well, unfortunately, the amount of businesses that I come across, shops, salons, commercial combined that have no element of insurance is incredible. Okay,
this is
they're just not insured. Right. Yeah. The private car market, you have to be insured to be on the road. It's a legal requirement. However, I still come across people that are not insured. If you run a business and you employ staff and you have public coming onto your premises, you need to be insured. I don't care how good your staff are with you. They may get injured and they may decide to pursue a claim against you. They are within their right to pursue a claim against you.
It happens. We see it in our industry as well. Yeah.
And you see, and if you've got public, and if you've got public coming onto your premises, you something may happen. They may make a claim, so you need to have that level of protection. Unfortunately, we do see time and time again. It's not at the top of our priority list until something happens, and then we scramble and we try and get things sorted out. But
it is what it is.
Yeah. So I would say rather than being price driven, be cover driven, and when you do take out insurance, be as transparent and as genuine as possible. Give the insurer more information than they need rather than less information. And be aware of what's covered. The insurer will have to send you out the quotation. I find people don't read the quotation. They just say, put it on cover. Read the documents that come. You get a statement of facts, you get a policy schedule, and you get policy wordings. Read these documents. And if you don't understand them, ask the broker to explain them to you. That's what we are there for. That's what you pay us for. Make sure you understand what you are covered for. It's happened more time where we now insist on sending documentation out to the client, and we insist on them confirming that they want to go ahead, but they won't read the documentation. Brokers can make mistakes. Everyone's human at the end of the day, but it's your asset you're protecting. It's you who's taking the policy out, and in the event of a claim, it'll be you who'll be benefiting or losing. So make sure you read the policy, and if you haven't read the policy or there's something you don't understand, ask your broker. Make sure you understand what you are purchasing.
It's a bit like any other consulting business, really. When you're consulting a client, the client is still ultimately responsible. If you're somebody's accountant, the accountant's not going to be responsible. Ultimately, the business owner is always going to be responsible to review the figures which the accountant has prepared. Similarly, with insurance, the insurance particulars, and the policy wording is something that you'll be sending. Most people will just say,
the policy wording can be daunting sometimes. It can be 40, 50 pages, and I totally appreciate that. But if you read your schedule and if you read your statement of facts, that's a very short document, but it shows you on what basis we've insured you on. And that's very important that is correct. Because if your statement of fact isn't correct, then your policy is nil and void.
Yes, exactly. And there are lots of reasons why a policy can become nil and void if you're not fulfilling the legal requirements as stipulated by the insurers, the T's and C's, making sure health and safety is a classic one as well, isn't it? If you don't have a fire risk assessment, insurance companies will say, look, we're not insuring you against fire unless you've done a fire risk assessment. And similarly, in insurance documents, there'll be loads of other prerequisites which will determine whether the policy is going to be live or become void. Because if it's not fulfilled, then it's not going to become. It's not worth spending the money on. I sometimes say that.
If you're gonna claim a policy which is not correct, it's no point spending that money at all.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not going to be worth anything. It's not going to be worth the paper it's written on anyway. So, excellent. So, from an insurer's perspective, in your own words, what would be your final tips for the viewers before going out to obtain insurance? What are the things that you would say as a summary, your key points that they should be mindful of?
Number one, as I said before, don't always be price driven. Okay, go for the cover because you want the best possible cover. Sometimes the best cover is only £10 more, right? Don't be price driven because price driven policies don't always work out for you. Number two, always be transparent. You have a duty to disclose all material facts. Okay, if you've insured your house and halfway through that policy you've had an extension done, or you've increased the number of bedrooms, or you've changed your tenant type, or you've any sort of change, it just takes a simple email to inform your insurer. It takes a simple phone call to inform your insurer. We do need to know, the insurers do need to know. We've had cases where at the start of the year, the property was tenanted by professional people. Halfway through the policy, the landlord decided to change the tenancy type and give it to social housing. Yet that policy is still in force. So they've changed the tenant type, they've changed the whole dynamics of the tenancy. There's been a claim, and the insurer has said, well, hang on, at the time of inception you had professional people living in here, now you've got social housing living in here, your policy is not valid, it's nil and void, we're not paying you a penny. Now we need to know these things. If your tenant type changes from professional working to unemployed, we need to know, because these have a bearing on your policy. So any material fact, always disclose it. Be upfront and be honest. If you're going to pay £1,000 for a policy, you might as well pay £1,200 for the correct policy. There's no point paying a penny if there's anything wrong with your policy. Even one tick box, if it's not ticked correctly, will deem your policy nil and void. It's just there's no way around it. So rather than blaming the insurer afterwards and saying, oh, they're bad, they're this, they're that, take a look at yourself. Were we honest? Were we truthful? Did we disclose everything? Have we done everything that we should have done? You can't drive a car without having a driving license. The car's not roadworthy without having an MOT and road tax. In the same way, your policy is not valid unless you've fulfilled all the requirements. And the biggest requirement is disclosure and letting us know about all the material facts. Fantastic. I could talk about this forever and ever, but so much has happened. But it's very
22 years of experience. There'll be a few experiences which you would want to share at some point. Maybe we could maybe you could do like a panel kind of a discussion amongst different compliance people on these particular subjects. What's been common amongst you've got employment law and stuff, because in insurance you've got there's so much you've got to cover. You've got the accidents and injuries, you've got the physical aspects of a business, you've got assets, you've got employees, you've got grievances. There's so many types of things that that people would want to seek cover for, but there's always going to be some kind of a limitation on what they can cover. As you've mentioned, you can't cover people and insure them against going into prison and upon being convicted. Or you can't insure them against being fined. They'll still receive a fine if that's going to be the case, and they'll still have to pay it. Insurance won't pay their fines. They may pay the legal fees to fight a legal case, but they won't against the government. And say if someone does wrong, somebody has to pay.
Okay, we are. I think we are running out of time. Now we're at 12 o'clock. But thank you for joining us, Majid. Back over to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a quick show, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's been interesting, and I think your sector and my sector, we could talk about it for days and days and days, and there's just so much to talk about. But thank you very much, and to our viewers, thank you for joining us this morning. Please keep tuned in throughout the week. We have various shows. We have business shows. We have all kinds of political shows, game shows. So keep tuned in. Keep sharing our platform. We look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week.